Hello, how are we doing? How have you been since the last video? Have you been catching up? Have you been studying? Have you been practicing? It's very important. We need to practice, practice, practice as long as we want to get through this well and right. Okay, so please keep practicing. If you've got any queries, any questions, just let me know and I'll be right there to help you with some of your questions or almost all of your questions as much as I can. Right. So today what we're looking at, we're going on to assessment, still on assessment. So for assessment, there are certain documents that are used. So our priority for this video are the documents used in assessment. Before November 2022, they use the News 2 charts, the GCS charts, and then the community charts. And these are charts that are used for your observation, to document your observation. However, after November 2022, the community chart was taken out and we're left basically with only the News 2 chart and the GCS chart. Now, what does the News 2 mean? So, the meaning of News 2 is the National Early Warning Score. So, it's the National Early Warning Score 2. It means there was a 1. Anyway, that's not your business. The real deal here is the News 2 chart, and which we use for the OSCEs. Everyone, as long as you want to be a nurse in the UK and you have to write the OSCE exam, you need to know this form. You need to work with it. You need to study this form and know how to use it. As beautiful as this form looks, as lovely as numbers are, I tell you, funny how people fill the assessment station just for chatting, wrong chatting. So for the purpose of this video, we're not talking about GCS chart. In the next video, I'll talk about the GCS chart. But for this video, we're focusing on the News 2 chart. Now, the purpose of the News 2 chart is to make sure you have all the observations that have been done and written out. Now, you also have a form that comes in your assessment, and this is the candidate sheet, the candidate notes. Now, it's also written there that you will not be marked on this sheet. So whatever you write there is like you are jotting your points. However, you won't be marked there. But I stress to candidates the importance of this document. And why is it important? Because you need to write down your numbers. It will shock you how 39 can change to 63 if you don't write the numbers down. So when you take the patient's temperature, you have to note it down on your candidate notes. When you take the blood pressure, you need to make sure you note it down. When you check their pulse, you need to note them down, however. Okay, so when you've gotten all of this written on this chart, on the candidate notes, when you take your break from the patient, not a break per se, but you tell the patient, oh, if you don't mind, give me a minute, I just want to transfer my numbers onto my charts. You then take out time and transfer your numbers that were in your assessment notes, which is the candidate notes, onto your News 2 chart. I'll tell us the reason why we use News 2 chart, or on what posts or what cases we use News 2 chart. So it starts with the respiration at the top. However, before that, you've got the full name, the date of birth, and the date of admission. That's information that comes pre-filled because this is the patient's information. So that's the patient in your scenario, their information. Most likely you have nothing to do with that. It should have been filled for you. Going down, the first thing you see is the date and the time. I say to candidates, please and please, you cannot have a reset just for date and time. Like, who does that? Please. So look at the column from top to bottom. You have the date, put your date there. Of course, it's the date of your exam. That's what you put there. However, people complain, oh, I think the box is too small. You can just put, if today's date was, say, 13th of February, you put 13/2. That's fine, okay? And then you come to the time. Some people are so used to the 12-hourly clock, and some people are used to the military time, which is the 24 hours. However, some struggle. They're like, there is no time in the scenario. Hey, there is time in your scenario. When you look at your front page, there is a time written. It says the day is today and the time is. So sometimes you see the time is 10 a.m. or 12. So whatever time is there is the time you transfer onto your news 2 chart. Okay? Done with that, the next thing there is your respiration. Now, the respiration, which is the breaths per minute, it goes from less than or equal to 8, which gives you a score of 3. Because if you look at the column, there's a middle column that has some numbers. The numbers ranging from 1, 2, 3. And the parts that have no number, which are the gray areas, are scored a 0. So whatever falls in the region of the gray area is scored a 0. Okay? Now, so the first one, which is the, let's call it the red, or, the red zone, or some people call it the orange zone. Whatever falls in there, no, that's the red zone, not the orange zone, is a score of 3. Why? Because it's less than or equals to 3. It means the patient's respiration was less than 8 or 8. I mean, please, we hope that doesn't happen, but it's really rare. But if that happens, this is just teaching you how to score. Then the next line above that, which is 9 to 11, which is the yellow row. Anything that falls in from 9 to 11, you score the patient a 1. Why? Because in the middle of the column, between the right and the left column, is the numbers. So it shows you what you are scoring. This form is very easy to use. Okay? Anything between 12 and 20 is a score of 0. Why? Because 12 to 14 is in the gray area. 15 to 17 in the gray area, a 0. 18 to 20 in the gray area, a 0. Okay? So if you have any number that falls in between all of these numbers, your score for respiration is a 0. Now, let's go to a score of 2. What makes the patient get a score of 2 in respiration? If the patient gets a score of 21 to 24. So, assume the patient's respiration was 22. You put your dot there and you're scoring the patient a 2. I think this is, it's just very clear. It's the orange zone. So let's look at anything above equals to 25 or above 25 is a score of 3. Now, we could get things in these numbers like this in cases of maybe breathlessness, unstable asthma, and things like that, depending on your scenario and depending on what your patient presents with. Please and please, whatever your patient presents with, whatever you count is what you record. What you have recorded is what you transfer. Now, the symbol for respiration is a thick dot. I encourage candidates to represent their numbers in between the boxes. Here, there is nothing you want to do on the line. So if it's a score of 16, in the line of 15 to 17, you just put a dot. And that is respiration. Let's go to the SpO2. The SpO2 have got 2 scales. It's got scale 1 and scale 2. Most people don't know how to use the scale. How do we use scale 1 or scale 2? Scale 1 is if the target saturation of the patient is 96 and above. So that's 96 to 100. Or some assessors, when you ask, they tell you normal. How do people know this? So some people ask assessor, what's my patient's target SATs? So they give you the target. Once they tell you 96 and above, you're using a scale 1. Now, how do we use a scale 2? It's also written there. It says use scale 2 if target range is 88 to 92%, e.g. in hypercapnic respiratory failure. So in cases such as COPD, most likely or emphysema, a patient could be on the target SAT of 88 to 92. However, you need to ask this question. It doesn't come from you. Why? Because your document says only use scale 2 under the direction of a qualified physician. How do we ask that in our exam? Assessor, please, what's my patient's target saturation? Okay? Or assessor, what's the target saturation of my patient? However, you need to put your statement, but you need to ask the question. So the assessor tells you, if the assessor says 88 to 92%, you know you're using a scale 2. This shouldn't be difficult for you, please. Don't make it difficult. Don't block your mind. These are easy things. Once you look at them, they're things you can do. Excuse me. So we've talked about the target SAT. Next, we look at air or oxygen. Air or oxygen. Some people are like, oh, I'm just going to leave that blank. Hey. You can't leave that blank. It has to be well represented. It will amaze you how the feedback comes in when people leave areas like this blank. Okay? And that's not what we want. Remember, the goal is to have a good pass rate. Okay? So let's do this together. Now, in the column of air or oxygen, air is represented with an A. Air is represented with an A. Okay? Below that, you've got the oxygen liter per minute. The oxygen liter per minute is written there. Then the device. If your patient is on air, the patient is not physically on oxygen. It doesn't say the patient is on oxygen in your scenario. It means your patient is on air. If your patient is not using any of the devices physically, the patient is on air. So let's assume the patient is basically on air, not on oxygen, you just put the symbol an A. That's all. Plain and simple. Okay? However, if your patient, peradventure, they were on oxygen, what's going to happen is you put the liter of oxygen there, because it's already said oxygen liter per minute. You put that code in there. So if it's a 5 liter per minute or a 6 liter per minute or a 3 liter per minute, all you need to do in that column is a 3. Now, you see that the row there is highlighting a 2, which is the orange zone. It's highlighting a 2. So it means no matter the liter of oxygen the patient is on, once the patient is on oxygen, they automatically score a 2. So what this means is any patient who is on oxygen must be scored a 2. Right? Now, looking at the device, just below that, the device has to be highlighted there. So we know the various ways of which a patient gets their oxygen through. It's either they could be on nasal cannula, on the mask, on venturi, on a rebreather, any of this. You have to put the code. Now there is a format which I could share with you that's got it has got the alphabets that represent this device. So if we were nasal cannula, I know some people will think is NC. Okay, so if it's nasal cannula, there is a code to represent it. If it was venturi mask, you put V. Now we know that venturi is represented by the percentage, so you could put V25. So whatever the percentage the patient is on, you need to put it. So depending on the device, if it's a non-rebreather, or it's if it's a rebreather mask, is written there. I could share that code with you. Just look for it somewhere around in this post or in the video. You will get that. I will send that to you as well. Okay, so I just want to keep this video short for this time. However, in the next video, I'll be sharing with you the codes, what we use for the blood pressure, the pulse, and then the consciousness and exposure, and then further down the chart. But if we look again, for the oxygen saturation, is represented with a dot. I realized I didn't say that. Is represented with a dot. Okay. If you check in certain test centers, their site, they've got a sample of how to represent all of these symbols in the chat, because some test centers are, they're picky on things like this, and it's really not nice when someone has to fail just because of a code. No way, that's not happening, right? And that's why I'm here anyway. So I'll be sharing some of these documents with you. Just look somewhere around this post, you will see the video, you will see the documents. And then yeah, I just want you to have the best of the information. And I will, in a different video, I'll be sharing with you how to use the scale too. Okay, that's like a different discussion on its own. Just stick with me. Click on the like button. Please like, follow, subscribe, share the video. I'll be coming with loads and loads of helpful information, tricks and tips based on your OSCE exam.